Welcome to another episode of Just More Fix. This is James. With me in this episode is Lacey.
Hey.
You can find us online at justmorefix.com or on Twitter at justmorefix. If you like us, you can support us at Patreon, and you can give us a rating and review at Apple Podcasts or wherever you find us at. In this episode, we're going to talk about the world of Krampus. And now, it's time to get our gaming fix.
I'm Willie D. Nelson from All Things Good and Nerdy, a pop culture podcast, part of the Gonna Geek Network. Just like the show you're checking out now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other tantalizingly geeky shows at GonnaGeekNetwork.com.
Welcome to another episode of Just More Fix. So you may have noticed that we didn't have an episode last week, but that's because it was Krampusnacht and St. Nick's Day. So for our family, we always do all of our Christmas stuff on St. Nick's Day with our immediate family. And along with that is the Krampusnacht, the Krampus holiday. So for those of you that don't know, I would recommend going out and just Googling Krampus, and it's Krampus. And he is sort of like the Merry Christmas Devil, right?
Yeah.
And
It's interesting, right? Because you can delve back at like pretty much exactly to the point where the pagan traditions and the Christian traditions started to meld into something that is like...
It's kind of funny because if you look at different parts of the world, like in Ireland, they have like St. Bridget and stuff where the Christian world absorbed a lot of their pagan traditions and said, hey, these people are cool, we'll make them saints. But with this one, it just does not come together. It's just like, yeah.
No, it comes together perfectly.
it's like
spot on.
It's sort of like oil and water. Like, hey, yeah, you have the Krampus, and we're not going to make him go away.
We're just going to take your Solstice Day celebration and turn it into something different.
So I would recommend, if you don't know what the Krampus is, to go and Google it. And take a look,
and also watch the movie because the movie's awesome.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good. So
we're going to talk about World of Darkness and Krampus, but just to give you
a frame of reference, basically,
a short historical,
a quick crash course in Krampus.
I like it.
St. Nick's Day is sort of where the tradition of Santa Claus comes from. Not even sort of, it is
St. Nicholas,
right? From St. Nicholas. So St. Nick's Day is December 6th. And if you were good, he brought you toys. Mm-hmm. If you were bad, the day before that is called Krampusnacht, and which means Krampus's night, right? So Krampus is this...
He's like anti-Santa. He's the antithesis of Santa.
So he
takes you and puts you in his sack,
right? So
or basket,
as it were, yeah. Or sometimes just drags you away in chains. So basically, Krampus punishes bad children
and adults.
Yeah, as well, adults as well. However, most of the depictions
children.
You see is with children. So
over here, you get lumps of coal in your stocking if you're bad. Way mild. Well, super mild. And there is also no Krampus, generally speaking.
There's a few places
for
where
most
they have,
people in the U.S., there is no Krampus.
Right. So in the places, and Krampus, I should say, there's a lot of different traditions with Krampus because it spreads throughout Europe. And so depending on whether you're in Germany or Austria or...
Italy, apparently.
Northern Italy. So there's lots of different ways that the Krampus looks, lots of different things that he does or how he goes, what he does to the children and that kind of stuff. But
he's
largely,
generally not entirely human, though.
Broadly speaking, yeah, he comes from like what's called a wild man tradition. So it's these sort of more or less humanoid, but some of them look a little more demonic, and then some of them look a little more human with horns and that kind of stuff, right? So he shows up, and you either get coal or birch switches in your boots that you put outside, right? And if you're a bad child, he comes to collect you and either stuffs you in a basket and takes you away, or takes you away in chains, or you might go in a sack. And depending on where you're at in Europe, you might get thrown in the Danube, you might get thrown into the Black Forest and left in a sack for the wolves. There's all kinds of different traditions that go along with this, right? So our goal isn't to like get into the nitty gritty of Krampus or where he comes from, but as an idea and a concept, I find it very, very intriguing. Along with this, there's all these kind of Krampus walks that they have. Some here in the U.S. There's actually one in Bloomington, Indiana, that I would like to make it to, but we just hasn't worked out very well.
It's a thing.
Yeah, it's in Bloomington, which is not very far from us. So if you're in Bloomington, Indiana, and you want to support something awesome, I guess, maybe.
I'm already working on my goat pants.
So there's just a long, deep tradition that go along with this, with Krampus. And it's kind of this weird fusion of a very clearly older pagan tradition that kind of gets lumped together with a more Christian tradition, obviously, right? And it's just this weird kind of, it didn't even meld. It's just like, hey, we're going to take this thing and set them right next to each other. There you go, right? So it's kind of like Dusk Till Dawn.
What?
So
explain yourself, sir.
All right, stick with me. Stay with me. Spoiler alert from like 1989.
It feels like
98.
Quentin Tarantino wrote the script.
No,
Is that what you're getting at?
So you have two drastically different things that are right next to each other that have almost no relation to one another, right?
Vampires and Mexican bars.
So wait, stick with me. When you first start watching
From Dusk Till Dawn.
From Dusk Till Dawn, wow. Oof. When you first start that movie, it's basically like a prison escape heist movie, right? And they're trying to escape, and George Clooney and Quentin Tarantino get to this bar, and everything is just this basic, sort of like criminal action movie escape thing, right? And then
you take a hard left.
Vampires. What?
Okay. All right.
So it's just sort of like there's two movies. They just said, hey, what if we made these into one movie? And that's just basically what happened, right? Here's two traditions. What if we just put them together and made one holiday out of it?
Okay.
That's what I feel like.
All right.
I don't know if that makes any sense to anyone except for me, but I just made it a thing. So there you go.
I just like the whole thing because it seems so much more wonderful, and not wonderful in a way that's like, this is awesome. Wonderful is in something that provokes a sense of wonder.
Right. So, okay, so what we're going to do in this episode is we're going to talk about Krampus and bring it in as inspiration for some Worlds of Darkness themes. And this is across multiple Worlds of Darkness. So Changeling, Vampire, all kinds of stuff, right? But I think what you just mentioned is important. Before we get to specifically like different World of Darkness settings, why don't we talk about maybe a few of the things that we like about Krampus and the idea behind it?
Okay.
So do you just want to do a quick top 3 things you like?
Top 3 Krampus things.
I think 3 is a good number, right? So we'll just go back and forth. So your first one was sense of wonder, right? Mm-hmm. So I can agree with that, but can we I think, and this is where a lot of my wonder comes along with things that I actually really enjoy, is like that terror that goes along with one. It's like a terrible wonder.
And this specifically, there is a very strong juxtaposition between the really bad and the really good, because you're putting them right next to each other.
Yeah. So that's actually where I was going to go. I like this really to stay like this positive.
But even that, I like it more than Santa, right? Because it's older and stranger.
Yeah.
That's part of the wonder too.
Okay, around strangeness. Yeah. I like that strangeness as well.
Because let's be honest, Christmas and Santa in and of itself, kind of strange anyway.
Yeah. But largely benign.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Or even if it wasn't, it's been sort of diluted down so much to where it essentially is, right?
Right.
So my first one is going to be the contrast that it presents between which is kind of where you were going a little bit, but I like the juxtaposition of the two things right next to one another. Mm-hmm. And it's very clearly good, very clearly not good, right? And I think it's intriguing that it's something that is such a stark contrast, but right in your face. There's greeting cards that used to be, that exist, and you look at, I posted a couple of them on our Facebook group, and it's the Krampus leading a line of children away in chains, right? And people are willingly giving the children to him. And I just think I find that sort of the juxtaposition of those two things really
only
intriguing.
The bad ones. They're more take this, it's broken.
It's just the bad ones. Right. Yeah. 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 All right. So what's your number 2?
Well, as with all truly wonderful bad guys, the Krampus is unstoppable.
Right.
He doesn't answer to you. He doesn't answer to any kind of higher being as far as you can see. He is himself, and he will do what he likes.
Right. Yeah. Right on. So mine next one is going to be that.
Oh, sorry. I forget.
Go ahead.
Along those lines, too. Cannot be bargained with.
Oh,
That's something else we've talked about, like with bad guys when it comes to Hellraiser and Pinhead, right?
Yeah,
another thing I really like. Like, I am just what I am, and this is what it is, and it is your choices that brought us here.
Right.
I am just here to fulfill the agreement.
Yes, I really like the idea of like creatures or enemies, antagonists that are in that vein of like that force of nature where why do I do this? This is just what I do. There's no malice behind it. This is just what I do. Right. You know, I like that.
There may be a little malice here, but.
Well, yeah. But I think you could make the argument that maybe it isn't, that it's just this, that's just what the Krampus does. Like something has to be done with these bad children.
I don't know. He seems to really be enjoying himself and all of the photography.
If you're going to be good doing something, you should probably be good at it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Like he loves his job. That's not a sin.
Right. Exactly. See? Right on. So my second one is going to be the fact that it's something that has survived as a tradition, like despite everything else. You know what I mean? Like
staying power.
Well, that, and it's just, it doesn't, like if you look across all of the other holiday stuff and, you know, even Halloween, like Halloween doesn't have this sort of sinister, you know, thing, stealing children, and like you don't take your kids out to a parade and be like,
sort of gotten dumbed down in all of the merchandise.
So like it has this old world feel to it, and
how Halloween should feel.
Yeah, like the survivability to it, that it's this connection to the past. Do you know what I mean? Like this strange otherworldly thing that's, you know, clearly not, you know, has traditions way, way back somewhere, right? I've got one. I'll do my third one. I don't know. And if you don't have a third one, it's all good. So mine is kind of going to circle around a couple of different things, right? So Carrie, who used to be on the podcast with us quite a bit, talked about, her mom is from Germany, and she talked about on Krampusnacht, you didn't go outside. Like when the sun was going down, you got home because there would be teenage boys that would be running the streets. You know, people were dragging chains and making noise, and it was basically just time, sort of like how it used to be in the 80s here on Halloween, to harass people and bother people and just cause general trouble, right?
The tricking of trick or treat.
Right. Yeah. But along with it, I feel like there's, and specifically with Krampus taking children, it's like how you talk about like he enjoys it, you know, this idea of sort of like a wicked fun. Do you know what I mean? Like it's fun, but like in a bad way, like a wickedness to it. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like wicked fun, but not like, oh, that's wicked fun. You know, I don't know if that makes, I don't know. Context is kind of funny there, but.
I guess, there's Krampus, but then there's like some other things surrounding him too. So like in some stories he has, you know, like minions or, you know, other people on his team. You know what I mean? Like, so he can be a solo operation, or he could come with his own sort of posse. Right. Which is cool. It sort of sets him up to be the major villain in a scenario.
Well, that, and then generally speaking, it's always referred to as Krampus as being one entity, but like when I've seen other stuff about him talking about how his tradition comes from this wild man tradition, that's not one creature. It's like there's many of these wild men that sort of, you know, exist. Well,
there's that, but then there's also Krampus, and then there's Ruprecht, and then there's like,
Short the Pete, and
like there's a lot of other like characters that you could pull in, involving the same night.
Some posse. All right, so using those broad 6 things that we have set up, right, I think we're just going to geek out about some World of Darkness things to do where you could sort of bring this in. So I think we maybe just start with the old tried and true vampire, right, to get the creative juices flowing. Yeah. So he looks monstrous, sort of, you know, in some of the pictures. Oh, before I forget, to go along with this, along with Googling, if you head over to our Facebook page, there's just one more fixed Facebook group. Tiziano Furlano, one of our Patreon supporters, went to a Krampus walk. I believe it's in northern Italy. And he's got some really, really awesome pictures that he shared on our Facebook group. So you can head over there and see them. And they're amazing pictures. And one of the really interesting things about him is because he mentioned that it's where a lot of the different Krampus traditions kind of crash together in one area. So there's a lot of different sort of visualizations of the Krampus, if that makes sense. So some are more demonic and some are more like humanoid-like or whatever, you know. So it's really, really cool to check out. So definitely head over there and take a look because they are they're really good. They're awesome pictures.
I feel like I should just like mention really quick that the picture above our mantle is The Wild Man by My Pet Skeleton, and he did some of the art that inspired the Krampus movie.
Yeah.
And so we really like his stuff. So that's another good Krampus inspiration.
Yes.
And he's got like an Instagram and stuff too. So.
And this year we got a Krampus in the corner to go with our elf on the shelf because I couldn't resist. So.
Because who doesn't need a plushie Krampus?
Right. So I really want to set him somewhere and take a bunch of candy canes and smash them into bits and make them in like a humanoid, like chalk outline shape where the elf would have been, and have the Krampus like stand over it. Like pulverized into candy canes, you know? Right on. All right. So vampire, right? So I think the easiest one to point to would be Nosferatu.
Right.
So there's all kinds of story, you're obviously feeding on people, right? So maybe this tradition got started because there's this old Nosferatu who traveled around Europe, or maybe there's a sect of Nosferatu that start this tradition to be willingly fed children, essentially, and they're nuisance children and bad children, right? So they're ones that no one's going to miss anyway. So what better way to maintain the masquerade and have a constant feeding source and a day that you can just go and cause all kinds of mayhem and trouble, and hey, no one cares. Maybe the prince doesn't like it, but no one complains. It's in my domain, or whatever, the area that I control, right? There's a lot of fun and mayhem to be had there. And
make a really interesting prey exclusion flaw, right?
Oh, yeah.
You build up some herd that way. You just store the children up all year long.
Right. Yeah.
That's where the workshop comes from.
Right. Well, and then I think you could take it in a way where, I mentioned there's a Krampus walk that happens in Bloomington, Indiana, right? So what happens when maybe one of the Nosferatu that holds this tradition either wakes up or moves somewhere else or goes somewhere else, or maybe maybe they have a sect of these Nosferatu that sort of keep this tradition. So they have a new initiate that happens to be from an area.
Of a sect. That's cool.
Yeah. An area that's not in that main location of that sort of Europe area, right? Like Western Europe, where this tradition comes from. So now there's this thing happening and it's all over the internet. How does the city deal with that? How does the prince and the leadership of the city deal with the fact that this is this thing that gets organized and is going to happen? And maybe some children go missing. Maybe they don't, right? Who knows, right?
Yeah.
The idea of a sect is really fun. You could play with that across times, too, because you could do that in Dark Ages and have it be this thing that's happening as it's, sort of newer, I guess, or Victorian times or modern times even, and sort of look at the different ways that changes things across time period.
So Nosferatu is like the most obvious pick. I kind of like Gangrel though, because he's a wild man. And so I think that just sort of fits in with their, operating procedure. Plus I like the idea of, we talked about him having a posse, like the animalism sort of aspect of that.
Right.
Plus you get kind of the shape shifting, with the Gangrel. So it could very easily be like a wolf or, even like a goat hybrid. I mean, he's like a goat man, right? So
well, you get some of the,
the black goat. That's a very demonic sort of thing that happens.
One of the bestial traits that come along with too much frenzy for a Gangrel. I think it slides right into that. Yeah.
And the big protean claws.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I think you could do a cool. There's all this fear of like the forest and darkness that's sort of ingrained. I feel like that's a really good one to bring in with some Dark Ages or some Victorian stuff where it's not quite modern yet. It's like if you're on the edge of the modern where the old world is becoming the new world, right? And you get to play with that back and forth between the two.
Gangrel are the perfect clan, really, for that kind of city versus rural battle that happens.
Right. Right on. So I'm going to go hard in the paint and go Zamisi. Because it just screams to me, fleshcraft, bonecraft, all this kind of stuff. And what better way than to break the masquerade Sabbat style than to just say, hey, we're going to have this giant festival where we walk around, sort of like full monster, just parading around, causing trouble. And I think that there's this wicked sense of joy that would come from a Zamisi that is willing, that with people willingly bringing their children out to be terrified to see what he's metamorphosized into and what he's become, right? And then maybe, who knows, steal a couple kids just like Nosferatu style we were talking before. And just that moment to sort of display him or herself, but also maybe the things that they make, right? Because they could be making other war ghouls that sort of have that demonic Krampus look to them, and having them all parade through.
I really like the idea of I can't think of I've lost the word. The things that Tsimisi make.
Vozid?
Yeah, I like the idea of a Vozid with like a skeletal basket that's just built into his back.
Oh, God. That's
like
so
this
good.
fleshy creature and like
right
bone
on.
horns.
Right. Oh, then you could be even more wicked and have like
terrifying.
You could put like sort of like flesh crafted little wicked ghoulish children in the basket that when you put the regular children in with it, like they, oh, that's so good. Like the bone basket, like ribcage style. Do you know what I mean?
Out a little bit,
oh man, that's so good. Oh, whoa.
So I will.
That's really good. Oh, I got one more thing though.
Oh, okay.
Before that ties to the Tsimisi.
Okay.
And I think this might be one of the things that I like about it the most with specifically Tsimisi. Tsimisi have this big connection to the past, to where they come from, to the earth, to the ground. And this is where that kind of comes together, right? It's this thing, this ancient thing that has never gone away. Mm-hmm. And I think that really speaks to the sort of Tsimisi mindset, right? And
the whole tradition, right? Tsimisi are sort of the most fey feeling of the vampires because they're not tied to humanity. They're all about metamorphosis. Right. And so they're on a different scale of understanding and a different scale of operation than most of the other clans. They're not so much about interacting with the other ones and politicking with the other ones. They're more about transformation of self into something else.
Yeah. Like ascension in a way, right? Yeah. I agree.
So they lend themselves nicely to the idea
I think that with the bone
transcendence in a way,
that bone woven wicker basket, that is such a great image. Like this giant hulking, because you look at the Krampus walks, they're on stilts sometimes, so this
like
giant
huge
hulking hairy thing with horns and heavy
and that's
breath.
part of the terrible wonder, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that sense of wonder comes from things that are just beyond your level of comprehension, and Tsimisi are very much that.
Yeah. That is so good. Oh, man.
So I will counter your Tsimisi with a touch more class, and I will present to you the La Sombra.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so you're talking about night and darkness and stealing things under cover of darkness. I also like the idea of manipulation of shadows so that maybe you don't ever actually see this creature, but it's projected in these shadows, which they're able to make look like any image that they would care to, as big and terrifying as you would like. And so it's not so much an actual creature as the fear of this thing that's in the shadows that you can see the shape of but never truly see. Right.
It's the fear, like the fear of the dark and the monster in the darkness.
Yeah.
And so
sort of like a melding of Krampus and like Baba Yaga, kind of like that.
I can see that.
The boogeyman.
Yeah.
Kinda.
Right on. So I'm trying to think across the other clans if there's any way to really twist this on its head.
Oh, no, sorry. Also, with the La Sombra, it makes it really easy to steal children, right? Because you just shadow step, poof, children are gone. There's no carrying them off. There's no worrying about getting caught.
Yep. There's a great image
They're
of
gone.
This inky black tentacle putting a child in a basket.
Well, I see like the inky black tentacle, but like the shadow of it looks like a giant clawed hand, right? So you just see it and it's snatch and gone.
Yeah. Right on. I feel like this is pretty straightforward, and I don't know that you could twist around like a Ventru or Bruja, Toreador, like your classic Camarilla vampires for this. It doesn't seem like, in my mind, it fits quite as well. It would seem more forced. Do you know what I'm saying?
The only thing I thought, because I thought about Ventru for a minute, and the reason being because of the sort of bargain that is arrived at. And when I think about bargaining and business, you think Clan Ventru a little bit, because they're all about that road of kings and that gathering of power kind of political influence. And it sort of reminds me of the character in American Gods, right at the lake, and they sink the kids in the lake. In the cars, in the trunk of the car. Like,
the goblin.
If that's not a fae, and that's just a regular looking guy, that is very much a Ventrue thing to do.
Well, I feel like the juxtaposition of the
sort
Krampus,
of that mafia, like I'll offer you my protection in exchange for
right. I think in my mind when I see it, I see the Ventrue as being like the Saint Nick character and the gangrel being under his thumb as the Krampus. Do you know, like, do this or I will send, my wickedness, to come get you or whatever, maybe. Do you know what I'm saying?
I could see that.
I don't know. I just feel like those don't quite fit as well, right?
No, I agree. They're definitely not the natural sort of segue.
Because I think if you're going to do something with this, you need to lean into that stereotype.
Powerful Ventrue can manipulate memory, so maybe you just create the whole Krampus tradition.
True. Just build it out of nowhere.
I just inserted this
right
into the collective conscious.
Right on. So I think the next easiest jump is to go to Changeling the Lost. Now, I know Changeling the Dreaming is more the old world or the classic World of Darkness or whatever, but I just feel like... What?
I'm stuck on the idea of a Ventrue Santa Claus. I really like it. Like popping majesty as you like walk down the street.
God.
Like, oh,
no.
Yay, Santa.
Father Christmas. Jeez. No. All right, so shifting gears away from vampire, we're going to go to Changeling. And I think I'm speaking for both of us, Changeling the Lost, in my opinion, is a way more superior game and concept and setting to Changeling the Dreaming. Changeling the Dreaming was cool, and it was pretty dark in its own way because they had failed so much. But I think just thematically, Changeling the Lost is amazing. And I think it's one of the strongest games that White Wolf produced. So, I mean, true fae, enough said.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
I know there's a lot of the stories for Changeling the Lost involve being kidnapped or getting lost. But what better way to just say, hey, he showed up and took me, and my parents gave me away willingly, right? Like, there's all these moments that could happen during the parade where, sure, most of them are people in costumes, but this one, his costume was really good, and the parade was happening, and my kid was going to get a picture with him or whatever, and then he turned around and they were just gone. Right. So I think there's these perfect moments for a true fae being a Krampus, right? And how cool could it be if you had maybe a whole motley of people that were all taken in this manner, like children of Krampus, right? And you'd always be worried around early December, Thanksgiving time, comes and you're all nervous because Krampusnacht is coming. And like true fae can't just come here, but that tradition is so strong that he can always come, and maybe he, if he left his mark on you because he had you for so long before you escaped, then he can always track you. There's a lot of really cool potential. I think it'll be a great game to run.
I think the true fae is cool, but I also like the idea. Stay with me.
Yeah, no, I'm staying with you.
So your winter court is all about rage and trying to fight back. So what if instead of that, we're trying to lure a true fae?
Oh,
so
like
it's
setting
actually
a trap.
Yeah, it's actually like a winter, winter court.
Yeah, like a
thing.
winter.
And so they're collecting children on Krampusnacht to try and lure this true fae to like stage this attack on
all
this
those
creature.
Parades, like they could totally set up one of those parades as a way to lure them out. Like, oh no, he's totally gonna come, and they're like waiting to ambush and whatnot.
Well, and then the parade doesn't have to be people in costume.
No,
right?
yeah.
Those are just changelings that have escaped the hedge, and they're just wearing their natural
drop their mantle and
and marching through the streets for a night.
Yeah, no, I was kind of thinking about a moment where you could have your changeling characters where they could just drop their masks and in that moment not even suffer any penalties from it because people are just there to watch and be like, whoa, look at all that, your trolls and your beasts and those different what do you call them? I can't think of the word, but it's the sub where how you're different. I can't. It's been too long since we played Changeling. Anyway, the faction of whatever you are, whether that's beast or elemental or whatever it is, ogre, how those break down. I thought that'd be really a cool moment to play through where you could just sort of once the parade comes, you can let that go. And then running the game, I think you could do some cool time crunch things where hey, in this moment, you've got free reign to sort of display and do whatever you want, but you got to know that it has to be done by this point. Otherwise, there's going to be huge repercussions because people know it's over. So how do you,
Right.
like that external pressure of time is something we've talked about several times. I think it's a really cool way you could really compress it down, right? And it's
sort of a Cinderella kind of.
well, yeah, exactly. It's like
By
reverse
midnight,
Cinderella.
this carriage will turn into a pumpkin.
Yeah, and then it's not even just time too; it's location because. Everybody knows where the Krampus walk is going to happen. They know the route, and it's a parade route, so everybody knows. So unless you're like a couple blocks either side of that, you can't be running around going crazy, So there's some cool constraints that you could have there, whether it's setting up an ambush or, running away from the Krampus. Maybe how cool would it be if no matter what, maybe you're this, chosen of Krampus or whatever, right? And you all have this compulsion to go back to the Krampus walk where you got stolen, and you just have to go there. And one of those things where no matter what you do, maybe you just go into a fugue state and realize, I just came out of it. I'm back on that street again, right? And so then trying to run away and escape, which one of these creatures is the actual Krampus? Is he even actually here? That kind of a cool, weird moment. And then I think that connects back to one of the stories, which is my favorite story in the Changeling book, where there's the brothers that are in the cages with the troll.
Yeah.
And then one of them, without giving it away, goes through this sort of transformation. And it's really wicked and crazy and cool. And I think you could do something very similar to that with this kind of a storyline that would be really awesome and terrible. That's really good. Oh, my God. There's too many good games. It sucks so bad. All right, so that's Changeling and Vampire. With any other ones that jump out at you for inspiration?
I mean, can you do this with Werewolf? It is a wild man.
I definitely could. Now,
it's not a wolf creature,
No.
but it's very close.
Right, and it's in that area where you can sort of manipulate it a little bit, to where it would fit. I think it's definitely doable. But my hang up with Werewolf is that I'm not super familiar with all of it enough to be able to be like this tribe or this whatever. Do you know what I mean? But I think it's you could definitely fit it in there. I think it makes sense. And it's a great moment of old world crashing against, the new world, which is very much what that werewolf theme is about, right? The wildness of the prior age versus civilization now.
So, I'm just going to throw this out there. Tell me how you feel.
Okay.
Orpheus. Okay, I know initially you're kind of like, ooh, don't know. But then I think back to the story in the book about the...
Let me circle back to Werewolf real quick, because I actually just had an idea. So, I can't think of the name of the corporation. Simtex? Either way, there's a couple different groups in Werewolf, whether you could do an abomination where it's a werewolf vampire hybrid, which we all hate those, right? But that could very well possibly be a Krampus. I didn't even think about Bali. That's an easy Bali as well. Boom, done. But well, that's werewolf or vampire or whatever. Anyway, and then there's I can't think of the name of it. It's the company that makes all the worm tainted stuff. It's a corporation, and I cannot think of what the name of what it is to save me right now. But you could very easily do something where it's worm tainted creatures, right? So it's people that are touched by the worm and whatnot, or have given in too much to their beast and have transformed into this Krampus, right?
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. I like that.
All right, it just popped into my head as you started talking about Orpheus. I was like, oh wait, no, I actually have a couple ideas now as I sit here and think about it. And I say all that, and I'm like the furthest thing from an expert in werewolf. I've never actually even ran a werewolf game. I don't think. I know I've ran one Dark Ages werewolf game, and it went pretty well. But anyway, okay, Orpheus.
Okay,
I'm with you.
Orpheus.
Yes.
So in one of the books that has some of the short stories in there's a story, and it's kind of set around in Mexico, a Dia de los Muertos parade. Right. And I sort of can picture something like that, and I just think about the way that stains can be manifested, and if you sort of combine that kind of All Hallows Eve feel, where like the membrane of that separates is just thinner. Right. You could, I mean, you're the storyteller. You can do anything you want, but I could very much see that same sort of thing happening on this night in the right location. And you have these things. And then it sort of is alluded in there that at least initially you don't really know what the specters are all about or what their big plan is, but it could, I mean, stealing mortal children certainly seems like something that could surely fuel something terrible, right?
Yeah. I would say that if stealing mortal children doesn't fit into your evil plot, you need to rework your evil plot. I mean, it should just slide right at whatever, you know.
And these are already the bad kids anyway, so their spite level is,
done.
You know, it's got to be like at least a 3.
Exactly.
I mean,
how else?
They're kids, but they're.
Maybe he's the one
like
that makes
they're
the
like
Lost
that
Boys.
redheaded kid in the Christmas Story, right? Like nobody likes that kid,
right? No, but what if he's the source of the Lost Boys?
Well, that's
all
awesome.
the Lost Boys are created by Krampus. Once a year, every year, like clockwork, this Krampus specter creature comes along, gathers all these wicked bad children, Lost Boys.
That'd be fantastic. Well, and they talk about like I think is it the Jason too?
Mm-hmm.
That
yeah.
I mean, is a murdering one, but there he has like the foresight and planning and
the physical presence and whatnot. I don't think it's. I can't remember.
I think I'm thinking of the wrong one. At least
it's not a Jason because those are the ones that are sort of mindless, but they're physical. Mm-hmm. Fox is another one that you could bring into. I don't know if you. Good one. Yeah, because they're very crafty and sort of
There's one that goes along with the Lost Boys though. Mm-hmm.
I can't remember now. It's been. Is it Guardian Angel?
Ooh, maybe.
Might be Guardian Angel. I can't remember. It's been too long.
Yeah, there's a lot of wicked cool specters in there, but some of them are very sentient and they're kind of purposely vague about them,
right? And it's easily adaptable. That's the whole thing. So,
but I just think that could be a really cool Orpheus mission. You get sent on a mission to Krampusnacht in this little village where something is just very much amiss. So,
and then
you have kind of your normal Krampusnacht stuff, and then you have this one location where there's something very much wrong going on.
Well, and then if you play through the Orpheus storyline, it's a big, long thing, right? And you could do that where it spans with time jumps spans multiple times, right? And how awesome would it be for you to realize early on in the game that the Lost Boys come from this Krampus-like specter that takes children and sort of molds them into these Lost Boys. Then you keep playing and you realize, oh, this happens every year like clockwork. So while you have the main storyline of Orpheus running along, there's this event that you know is going to happen. So do you do something about that? Do you try and stop the Krampus? Can the Krampus be stopped? Is that an entity that when you destroy it, if you could, just respawns again because of the belief in it or whatever, like all this kind of stuff. I think that's a really cool thing that you could sort of blend into the actual storyline where it wouldn't break anything in terms of what's happening in the story, but would really sort of twist it up and make some cool choices about like, oh, do we go deal with this on December 5th? Or how does that work against the main storyline of priorities and whatnot? That could be wicked cool. So, anything else for Orpheus, or do you think it's...
I don't know. No, I think that's pretty much it. I don't know. I'm just thinking, I go to Orpheus first, but obviously anything you could do with Orpheus, you could do with a Wraith game.
Yeah. No, yeah, I agree.
I like that particularly for an Orpheus thing, because I think it would be a really interesting mission that could be holiday themed, but way different than like,
Yeah.
So Santa's coming to, the dungeon with gifts for all the good explorers.
Right. So I think that anything that involves nightmare and nighttime and shadows and stealing children and whatnot fits easily into any kind of a Wraith game. Like it's just like Vampire, right? It's just like right in there and it's easy to do. You just have to find the right reason and motivation for someone to be involved with it, but it's just so easy. So
I think
I agree. What?
I was just thinking like it would be a really great thing to make somebody's shadow do if you were playing their shadow. Like maybe you were like some rescuer of misplaced children or, yeah. Anyway, that's awful.
No. I had another thought.
Well, you would have to have a decision big enough that would justify them agreeing to letting you take over to steal a child too. So, that's
what if
really
they just knew? What if the shadow just plotted every year to store up the angst until it knows what the day is? Like on December 5th, I know I've got to have it stored up, and I'm going all out. I'm going, it's I only go out once a year. I go hard, right?
It's next level bad.
So I think to tie in some of the other ones, just real quick, Mage I think is easily doable. It's a magical creature. Pretty straightforward, easy to do. How do your mage characters deal with that? It's a spirit. do they go stop it? Do they not? All that kind of stuff. I think it brings in a lot of the same themes as the other ones. It's just you're a wizard dealing with this problem instead of a vampire or a werewolf, right? It's just thematically kind of different. Although I would say as a spirit and an entity, lots of people celebrate this. It's existed for a long time, which means lots of power, lots of resources. And even if you defeat them, probably not long-term death, right?
Yeah.
All right. So with that, are there any other World of Darkness themes to bring or games to bring in with this? Mummy doesn't fit, I don't think, at all.
Like everything.
So I think that pretty much wraps this up with all of those. So there's lots and lots of great ideas. Now, what I think had I not just told you this awesome idea that I'm having right now, all kinds of people I see online always do some kind of themed game for holidays, whether it's Halloween or Christmas or whatever it is, right? So when you have a Christmas themed game, usually they're like a little silly and Santa themed, right? But how awesome would it be to have your players come to the table expecting holiday game? Santa Claus is coming to town, and you're like, yeah, tomorrow, tonight, it's the Krampus, right?
But first you have to survive the night.
Right. So it's this, I think it's a really good way to sort of, now obviously you know your player base and whatever, but like I would totally be down to be walking into expecting Santa Claus and get the rug pulled out from under me and realize, oh my God, Krampus wickedness, right? That would just be
probably
amazing.
Probably why vampire is just my favorite for this, right? Because sun up Christmas morning, you're all good.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah, you're totally right. I agree. Right on. So just to close this up and put a bow on it. That was so bad. No. What?
No. To wrap up this Krampusode.
Oh. Which of these ideas is your favorite?
I mean, it's vampire.
Really? Like individually, which one?
How dare you, sir? I mean, my heart just wants to go with the Simisi skeleton basket.
Yeah.
I can't help it.
I understand.
They're all good, but
I think the strongest
Changeling is the easiest fit. I mean, because it is basically a Changeling story.
Yeah.
It's it's a fairy tale.
Uh-huh.
Right. But I like the idea of doing it with Simisi because Simisi.
Yeah. I agree. The strongest visual is definitely the Vozid with the ribcage wicker basket with the sort of like ghouled, wicked children claws and gnashing teeth inside the basket.
Just picture him like fleshy, like the terrifying thing from Pan's Labyrinth, right? Yeah, like that with the long, spindly fingers and the fleshy colored, because, things that are just like sallow flesh colored are just innately like just wrong feeling. They make you like cringe and like, oh.
Yep. I like the idea of a sect of Nosferatu. I think that has some cool potential if you're running a game that's like larger than just one area. But I got to say, the idea for Orpheus that this one creature is creating all the Lost Boys because they run in packs, right? They run in like, when you have an encounter, there's lots of them. So I think the idea of having
I would love
one thing being the source is cool.
So you go, this is a little bit silly, but also like super fun because like, what if this, because spectral creatures can be anywhere, right?
Right.
But what if there really is like some kind of like North Pole location and you just enter this area and there are just like thousands of Lost Boys.
Right. Just there milling around waiting for something to leave. Yeah.
So silly, but also terrifying.
I also really like the idea of maybe as a one-shot running a game where all the characters are in Changeling the Lost and they're all like children of Krampus. And so they every Krampusnacht, they come back to whatever location and this weird moment of trying to avoid sort of like heist style, right? Like an escape, suspense escape kind of a thing of trying to stay away from the true Fae and getting stolen and taken back to the ferry and being held like wicked children again is really cool. And they can do some cool stuff with like, you were a bad kid because he only takes bad kids, right? That's part of the rules for him. So he has to abide by that. So you were a bad kid. So who are you now, right? And after all the time you spent in the ferry, how does that change it? Like there's some really cool things to do there. But I think that game would quickly move away from that. And then you could have this recurring cycle as the seasons change where you come back around to deal with that in the same way that you would with Orpheus. I like this cyclic thing that could happen in the game where you just realize the longer the game goes on, the more and more potential there is for something bad to happen because, Krampus is always going to come back every year. Right on. Well, I think that'll do it for us. This is a pretty awesome one. You just sort of like off the cuff spun up an idea. I wanted to do something themed around Krampus and Saint Nick's Day or whatever. I thought it would just be a cool, fun episode to do. But this is a great idea. This is a lot of fun. So I think there's a lot of really easy ways to adapt this into a fantasy game as well. Like if you're playing a Lamentations game and you're in a game in the 16th century, in the 1600s. Way awesome, easy stuff to do if you want a weird monster to encounter that comes on this cycle. The idea of holidays and monsters, I think, is really kind of interesting and cool. So there's lots of potential for this outside of just World of Darkness. I think it fits really easily into World of Darkness. So
agreed.
Right on.
I'm picturing a frosty dungeon crawl, just so you know.
God.
Lots of but hardcore, right? So
hardcore frosty.
No, checks against the cold.
Oh yeah. Exposure.
Just brutal and frozen abomination creatures and this Krampus lair and all these children that are chained up down there.
Right.
I mean, it could be fun.
Right on. I agree. Well, if you haven't already joined our Facebook group, you should definitely head over there and check out the pictures that Tiziano Furlano put up because they are really good. They're really awesome and amazing. And I think they could give you a good amount of inspiration for any other kind of non-Krampusy gaming that you're going to do because they're just really good sort of... Krampus is just awesome. It's just such a different thing that's just different than anything else. You know what I mean? So lots of inspiration to be had over there. And if you have incorporated any kind of awesome Krampusness into your games, let us know. You can hit us up on Twitter or Facebook or email me, James Just More Fix, and we'd love to see what you've done with it to sort of blend some creative ideas and see what can come out of it. And yeah, so if you like what we do here at Just One More Fix, you can support us at patreon.com/JustOneMoreFix and head over there to join all of our Patreon supporters in supporting the show and get access to all of our raw audio feeds, pre-shows, as well as our zine in PDF or print format, depending on which level you support at. And join the awesome ranks of our Patreon supporters like Tiziano Furlano, Timothy Barra, Simon McNair, Hector Treelane, Alan White, Alistair H., and the OG Todd Olson. We're also a member of the Gonna Geek Network, so you should head over there and check out all the geeky shows over at GonnaGeekNetwork.com and give them a listen in case you're into other geekiness, like I think nearly all of us are at some level. And I think that'll do it for us, and we will see you all next week. Thanks for listening. This has been an episode of Just One More Fix. Music has been provided by Kevin MacLeod. You can find him at Incompetech.com. You can support us at Patreon.com/JustOneMoreFix or follow us on Twitter at Just One More Fix.